Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. It's Mr. Nelson. We are going to be doing our second major lesson. So today's lesson is on the framework for studying religions. We're going to focus in on a few different things, primarily what are the main components for when we study a religion. So we're going to be looking at, throughout this course, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism for the most part. And we have a similar framework for studying those religions, and I'll talk about those. We're also going to be focusing on Aboriginal spirituality. And the title subtopic is Aboriginal Spirituality, the Beginning of It All. So when we talk about a framework for studying religion, we're going to be looking at the common questions concerning all religions. These include things like the origins, so how the religion was formed, who are the major founders, how it has evolved over history. We look at the beliefs and teachings, how people should behave, what are their beliefs, what are their major teachings. We look at symbols, so the cross, for example, in Christianity, or the rosary. We look at these symbols and we say what objects, actions have meaning in these religions. We also look at specific practices and rituals. So how is the religion expressed? Milestones. What is celebrated in life? What milestones do people celebrate? Writings. What do the sacred scriptures say? And we'll do a little bit of text analysis there and find out what are the major verses or sayings in these religions. And then we'll look at groups and institutions. So how does the religion actually operate? What is the hierarchy? What are the major groups involved? Are there institutions, buildings, organizations that are involved in the religion? And cultural impacts. So what effect does it have on society? So what effect does this religion have on culture and the society at large? So origins of spirituality. We're going to start in this lesson today. We're going to be focusing on 3 Aboriginal creation stories. And some of you are familiar with this from Miss Lee's most recent class. But those of you who were with me last class, you probably didn't hear these stories. They might be completely new to you. So we are going to read 3 different Aboriginal creation stories. And these stories are similar to creation stories in other world religions. And really, they attempt to explain how the world began. So yesterday, we had a bit of a debate, and we had a journal response about creationism versus evolution. And we discussed whether they have to exist exclusively, or can they coexist, and can there be some sort of meeting on the continuum? Well, today we're focusing in on religion specifically and the creation from an Aboriginal standpoint. So I won't go in these in full detail because I want you to read them as a group, but just a quick overview of each of the 3 stories. So the first creation story is Turtle Island. And just a bit of background here. The story is from Iroquois peoples and begins in the sky world. I've added a link here, and I will also be handing out a printed copy of Turtle Island. The second creation story is the story of the Raven. It comes from various Northwest Pacific Coast Aboriginal peoples. And the third story is the White Buffalo Calf Woman. And the Great Plains Aboriginal cultures passed along the story of creation, in which people are told to pay homage to the Great Spirit using a sacred pipe. Now, last Monday, we actually had a presentation by a First Nations member, and she basically gave us a lot of insight into some of the cultural traditions of some of the Aboriginal religions. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate a little bit about oral history and mnemonics. So Aboriginal peoples were great orators. That means their ability to tell stories and pass on stories was phenomenal. So sacred stories were spoken orally and not recorded. To do this, they used mnemonics. And mnemonics actually is a technique they use to help them remember these stories. Imagine for a second with me, if you will, how could you remember these stories over let's say over a lifespan, something that happened to you when you were a child or happened to your parent or grandparent, to be able to tell it exactly as it was and not change the oral history. Well, mnemonics is how they did it. So basically they used the initials of words or passages, and they used it to create a nonsensical sentences. And by doing so, it actually helped them to remember what the story was. So if you've ever heard the whole, when you're trying to remember the directions in geography, northeast, southwest, and we come up with never eat shredded wheat. That is an example of a mnemonic. But of course, the mnemonics that were used were extremely intricate and extremely detailed. Also, there were wampums that were used, the wampum belts, and these were basically colored beaded belts. And each color and number of beads or symbols represented a different part of a story or a treaty. The elder's role. Elders in most Aboriginal societies were highly respected and are still highly respected to this day. They passed on sacred beliefs and stories orally, and they were regarded as wise. They were also expected to teach younger members values such as sharing. In terms of Aboriginal belief of death and the afterlife, like many religions, most Aboriginal legends have stories concerning reincarnation or rebirth. The Great Plains peoples believe in 4 souls. So one journeys along the spirit path and is judged by an old woman. It will either reconnect with ancestors or return to Earth as a ghost. And here you have a bit of this idea of rebirth or reincarnation. The Woodlands Iroquois believe souls/spirits enter man-made objects. And that's where we get this idea of animism. And I mentioned that a little bit in yesterday's note, where inanimate objects basically take on personification. So this belief of maybe a rock or a bead or a totem pole, this might or some other material might be able to encapsulate a soul, a spirit, or some other sort of personal characteristic. So speaking of totem poles really link Aboriginal people to mythical ancestors. They are protective entities of a clan or a nation or a group of people. And basically they're represented by plants, animals, mythical beings. So totem poles are long poles that have several totems placed on each other to recount history. So that's it for today's lesson. Tomorrow we will be looking at various practices, rituals, and festivals, as well as milestones that are important to Aboriginal peoples. So Aboriginal peoples are the first main religion that we are focusing on. Feel free to scroll back over this video as many times as you need to, or rewind a little bit and get some clarification. Also, as always, ask in class. Please come up to me, ask me a few questions about this presentation for anything that you are uncertain about, any questions, comments, or concerns, and I would love to help clarify that information for you. Okay, take care.